I was approached by a friend to become involved in a new development in Canberra. The person who was getting together a syndicate of 8 members to start self-storage in Canberra, and he wanted the syndicate members to all have a skill to provide for the development process of the self-storage. So a friend of mine who had been approached recommended me because I had a computing background, and our founding chairman, King Leggett, he believed that we shouldn't start without a computer system, and there were none available that were geared to the Australian environment in the early 80s. So I was invited into the group and to also invest some money as well as become part of that group of 8 members. King was able to acquire a block of land from the ACT government of some 7 acres in the Belconnen town centre, which was a highly visible site. It was an old dump originally, and so we got the 8 investors to put some money in, and then we went to the banks to get ourselves started. And that we didn't have to pay for the land straight away. The land we had to pay land rent for the first 7 years, and then we could buy it outright. That was the system in Canberra when you were at that time, which was very fortunate. So we started building. We had our own, in our group was an architect and a civil engineer, and our architect came up with a way of building it with concrete tilt-up panels that were spaced every 9 metres, and we poured them on site, and that's how we started the complex. The unit sizes in that were configurable to whatever size we wanted to do, and you could pull the partitioning down and re-establish different sizes depending upon the demand you had at a particular time. So when we built it with the tilt-up concrete panels, but we didn't always partition it straight away. We waited for the clients to come in, and whatever they required, we could then partition the next section of the building up. And our first building, which was something like about 108 metres long by 16.5 metres wide, was, even before we finished building it, it was half occupied. We were still building the second end of it while we had customers coming through the door. So from that start, that building, that site was gradually built over the next 15 years. In the meantime, we acquired land in the southern part of Canberra in Tuggeranong. That was a bit over 5 acres, and we followed the same approach with our building technologies, and our plans, and we gradually started off with one building and then gradually just built them as demand came for that. In 1999 we acquired probably our major site in Fyshwick, which was again bounded on a freeway. It was also about 7 acres inland, and again we followed the same approach. We did our own design, and apart from the first buildings, which was built by an external contractor, the rest of it was built within our own organisation. We subcontracted it all out through under our own control, and we continued to operate the self-storage up until the time when we were approached by Abacus and we sold to them. Jim Miller gave us some advice before we even started on because he was the guru, if you like, of self-storage at that time. He'd started it off with Neville Kennard's at that time. He came to us and said, it's about time we started a self-storage association along the lines of what he'd seen in America. And so we were invited to join in with the other founding members of the Self-Storage Association. And that included other members from Canberra who also were there as well in the founding group. I think our biggest challenges were always with the banks. You might recall that the period from the early 80s to the mid-90s were financially challenging. The banks at this time tended to, if you wanted to borrow $2 million, they had to have $4 million in your reserves, of course, which was nonsensical. But and the banks didn't quite understand that it's self-storage where you don't have people locked into long-term contracts. Their feeling was that it's not safe for them as a lender. But we were able to convince them after showing a period of our early days that while you might have 20 or 30 customers move out every month, you had 20, 30 or 40 move in the next month, so in that same month. So it's we were able to convince them through our performance that we were, that we were good borrowers. Keeping up with the trends of what was happening elsewhere not only just in the country but internationally, particularly America, who were the people that started it all off, and that gave us sort of impetus into things like newer computer systems that people were getting more experience with, that were being adapted more to the Australian way of doing things, and also things like packaging and stuff. Like in the early days, we started off with no packaging sales whatsoever, but very quickly that became obviously a source of income and service for our customer base. And that sort of information about trends and so forth was you wouldn't have got it any other way apart from being within the association. First of all, probably the friendships within the Canberra community, they were the more constant associations, particularly with Joe Barbaro in the early days of the association. Joe and I were involved in starting up the Storage, which was the bulletin for the self-storage members in the early days of the association, it also broadened you. When you went to conferences, you got to meet fellow operators who we were all of the same mind of sort of growing our just not our association but our friendships, and that was a very valuable networking association that helped you think about, I've been doing it this way but they do it that way, so you take up a number of those ideas, and people are very similar in their attitudes and so forth. So it was made some great friends over the years from all over Australia, and yeah. Well, there's a couple of incidents that I'll say I fondly remember, though they stick in my mind. Was a guy, a funeral operator from the back of Yass, thought he'd start up a funeral business, and he approached us to use some of our storage units for storage of the bodies. He wanted to know whether he could get electricity into the units so that he could keep them in cold storage in between while he waited for the funeral occur. So that was an interesting approach. Of course, we never went ahead with it because it fraught with danger. The other one was one Friday afternoon. We were in our Belconnen office, and all of a sudden about 3 of the television networks all turned up outside our facility and were wanting to come in and film the police, but the police hadn't arrived, so they'd been listening on their intercoms or two-way radios that the police were about to go to Belconnen self-storage facility, U-Stow-It, and there was interest in it that there was a Ruger rifle had been found in one of the storage units, and the Ruger rifle was associated with the murder of the head of the police force in the ACT, Colin Winchester, and that nobody had ever found the rifle at that stage that was so-called associated with the thing. So that brightened up our Friday afternoon. That's just a couple of